and drops you right in the middle of a moment you never prepared for. Sometimes it shatters everything, not with chaos but with quiet. And that night, the night everything changed, I had no idea what was coming. For a long time, I thought I knew exactly where my life was heading. I thought I had built something stable, something safe, something that felt like forever. I believed in that kind of love. The gentle, predictable kind that grows roots and stays. But sometimes love doesn't leave after an argument. Sometimes it doesn't end with tears or shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it ends in silence. A silence so deep it echoes inside you long after the person who created it is gone. And mine, well, mine came on an ordinary Tuesday. No warning. No softness. No closure. Just a note. A pathetic, scribbled note taped to the fridge. The same fridge where we used to stick photos from weekend trips and silly grocery lists we never followed. A half-hearted apology scrawled in uneven handwriting I had memorized after 5 years. 5 years. 5 whole years together. And all I got at the end of it was a folded piece of paper and a house key tossed carelessly onto the counter. Like I was nothing more than a temporary resident who had finally overstayed her welcome. I remember staring at that key. It was cold, expressionless metal catching the harsh kitchen light. Harmless. Simple. Just an object. But the longer I stared at it, the more it felt like a blade pressed into my palm. Until I couldn't tell if the pain I felt was physical, or if it came from the realization that everything I had built, everything I had trusted, everything I had loved was gone. Just like that. The silence that followed was unbearable. Not peaceful, no. This silence screamed. It filled the rooms, seeped into the walls, echoed off the floors. It made my heartbeat sound too loud. It made the apartment feel too big. It made me feel too small. And that's when I called her. Carrie. My best friend since childhood. The kind of friend who didn't need to hear you cry to know you were breaking. She could hear it in the way you breathed. In the way you said hello. I barely spoke a sentence before she cut me off gently, the way only she could. Pack a bag. You're staying with me tonight. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just knew. That's who Carrie was and still is. The kind of friend who shows up before you even know how to ask for help. I agreed instantly. Not because I wanted to talk, and definitely not because I wanted company, but because staying in that apartment felt like suffocating in slow motion. Escape wasn't a desire. It was a necessity. So I packed whatever I could think of, mismatched clothes, a toothbrush, my journal, the sweater he once said he liked, and I left. I didn't even turn off the lights. I just walked out the door and didn't look back. Carrie's place was nothing like mine. It was older, taller, with brick walls and high ceilings. The kind of building that looked like it had lived 100 lives before we ever stepped foot inside it. Sunlight poured in through massive windows during the day, painting the floors in warm gold. At night, the shadows stretched long and soft, making the space feel cozy instead of empty. Even in silence, that apartment felt alive. When I arrived, Carrie hugged me tightly, painfully tight, and whispered, "You'll have the apartment to yourself for a bit. Nathan's out of town for work." Nathan. Her older brother. I remembered him vaguely from school events years ago. The quiet one who always sat in the corner with his guitar, half in his own world. He never seemed fully present back then. He always felt like a page torn out of a different story. So when she said he wouldn't be around, I felt relieved. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to explain anything. I wanted to disappear for a while, quietly, without judgment. For 2 full days, I barely spoke to Carrie. I lived like a ghost in her apartment. I drank coffee I couldn't taste. I answered questions with nods. I let the hours blur together like watercolor. I sat by the giant living room window and watched people go on with their lives, walking dogs, carrying shopping bags, laughing with friends. And I wondered how many of them were broken too. How many were carrying around silent grief. How many were pretending. Then on the 3rd evening, everything changed. The front door opened. Softly. Unexpectedly. I froze. Footsteps crossed the hallway, slow, steady, unhurried. And then he appeared. Nathan. But not the Nathan I remembered. The boy I barely noticed in school was gone. He had become a man, one who carried silence differently. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was depth, gravity, stillness. His hair was messy, that effortless kind of messy that somehow looked intentional. He wore a simple gray t-shirt and dark joggers. And he moved with this calm, quiet confidence that filled the room without trying. When our eyes met, he gave me the smallest nod. Polite, reserved, but warm. A reminder that I wasn't invisible, even if I felt like I was. Hey, he said simply. His voice was low, gentle, almost soothing. E maneja suft, au quarto. E. And that was it. The first conversation we had exchanged in years. 2 syllables floating clumsily between us. The days that followed were strange. Quiet, but not uncomfortable. We didn't talk much, but we shared space. A polite smile in the kitchen. A soft thanks when passing the remote. A nod when crossing paths in the hallway. We were 2 people pretending not to notice each other, while being constantly aware of each other's presence. It suited me just fine. I didn't want connection. I didn't want attention. I wanted stillness. A place to breathe. A place to fall apart quietly. But silence never stays empty for long. That I slipped outside for a walk. The air was sharp against my skin, the kind of cold that wakes you up whether you want it to or not. The city hummed under flickering streetlights. Leaves skittered across the pavement in little spirals, carried by a breeze that whispered secrets only lonely people can hear. By the time I returned, the apartment smelled faintly of rosemary and red wine. Nathan was there, reclined on the couch, one ankle resting on his knee, a half-open bottle breathing quietly on the coffee table. The TV glowed softly against the brick wall. A romantic comedy was playing. Notting Hill. I blinked, half surprised, half amused. You like this movie? I asked, teasing lightly as I set my keys down. Nathan looked up. The corner of his mouth tugged into a subtle grin. Only when I'm depressed, he replied. It caught me off guard. And I laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in weeks. 2 glasses were already poured. He didn't invite me to join him. But he didn't have to. I sat on the other side of the couch, not close, not distant. Somewhere in the middle. A safe space. The movie filled the silence between us. Soft laughter. Familiar lines. The kind of comfort that creeps up on you when you're not paying attention. And then during that quiet, iconic moment, when Julia Roberts said, I'm just a girl, standing in front of a boy, asking him to love her. I felt him look at me. Just for a second. Barely a heartbeat. No words. No shift in posture. Nothing dramatic. But something inside me moved. And that moment became the beginning. The quiet beginning of something I didn't yet understand. The apartment settled into a rhythm that felt almost sacred. Morning sunlight bathed the kitchen. The brick walls glowed gold. Nathan's footsteps became familiar, slow, steady grounding. We developed rituals without meaning to, sharing coffee in the mornings, leaving little notes about groceries, watching movies at night, sometimes talking, sometimes not, sitting in silence that didn't feel empty anymore. There was something between us, not love, not yet. Something softer, gentler, like warmth in winter. It was nearly 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were too loud. My heart felt too heavy. So I wandered into the living room, barefoot, wrapped in an oversized shirt. The room was dimly lit by the soft blue glow of Nathan's phone. He didn't look surprised to see me. Couldn't sleep? He asked quietly. I shook my head. You too. He set his phone aside and patted the couch, a silent invitation. I hesitated. Then, he said. We didn't speak at first. The silence felt weighty, but not in a painful way. It felt like the kind of silence that waits with you instead of suffocating you. The city murmured through the window. Distant cars, someone's laughter echoing from the street below, the hum of the refrigerator, all blending together into a peaceful white noise. Then Nathan asked, Do you miss him? The question hit harder than expected. I stared at my hands, tracing invisible patterns on the fabric of my shirt. I don't know, I whispered. Sometimes. I wonder if I ever really had him. Nathan turned toward me, his expression unreadable, his eyes steady. Maybe, he said softly. It's a good thing he's gone. There was no pity in his voice, No judgment. Just truth. Painful raw truth. I looked at him. Really looked at him, searching for something, anything. A sign of pity. A sign of misunderstanding. Something to push me back into my familiar shell. But he wasn't offering pity. He wasn't offering answers. He was offering presence. And sometimes presence is more powerful than comfort. After a moment he asked quietly, "What scares you the most about all of this?" I swallowed hard. I began slowly. I think I'm more afraid of being wanted than being alone. He inhaled sharply, like the words caught him off guard. He leaned forward, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You've always been wanted, Rachel. You just never noticed." And something inside me cracked open. Not painfully, gently. His hand rested near mine. Not touching. Just close enough for warmth to spill from one of us to the other. I didn't think. Didn't analyze. Didn't retreat into fear or logic. My heart leaned forward before my mind could pull me back. And that night changed everything. Grief turns you into a stranger to yourself. It makes you forget who you were before the pain. But sitting there with Nathan, someone who saw me not as something broken, but as someone worth seeing, I remembered. Bit by bit. Breath by breath. Nathan didn't try to fix me. He didn't promise the world. He didn't push or pull. He simply saw me. And sometimes, that's enough to begin again. Every glance felt heavier. Every laugh lasted longer. Every brush of skin lingered like a question we were both afraid to answer. We didn't talk about that night. The closeness, the near touch, the shift in the air. Some things are too delicate for words. One morning, sunlight spilled over the counter as I made coffee. When I turned, Nathan was watching me with a soft smile. "You look more like yourself today," he murmured. I didn't ask what he meant. I knew. The grief was no longer defining me, just following me quietly, like a shadow that had lost its shape. And Nathan, he had become proof that healing doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, in shared mornings, in subtle glances, in the simple comfort of knowing someone sees the parts of you thought were gone. The moment she saw us in the kitchen together, the way we moved around each other so easily, so naturally, she smiled. A knowing, warm, silent smile. She didn't ask anything. She didn't need to. And one evening, as I packed my things to leave, Nathan leaned against the doorway.